Hey guys, it's Kevin here, my review for Welcome to Marwen. And what Welcome to Marwen is essentially about is we center on the character of, well, the true story actually, of Mark Hogenkamp. He is someone who used to be an artist, but unfortunately has had all of his memories wiped away after a really bad gang fight that he was in, and he was pretty much beaten nearly to death. But somehow he has survived miraculously, and basically since then, all his memories have basically gone. So what he does as a coping mechanism is basically create these dolls, and these dolls kind of act as this inner world he has created called Marwen. Each character in Marwen represents someone else that has had an impact on him, and basically the rest of the film is him, embracing Marwen, but also trying to get over his difficulties, and maybe finally trying to, let go of the past and move on, but that's really all I'm going to say. So Welcome to Marwen overall, I was very excited for this film. This looked like a very original and fascinating film. I didn't really know too much about Mark Hogenkamp. I did not watch the film called Marwen Call that was made several years ago. I heard it was a very good documentary, but unfortunately I was not able to check it out in time for this film. But this looked, like I said, like a very creative and different film. It looked like a story that I think definitely needs to be told because we don't hear about stories like this before. And it seemed like Robert Zemeckis was the right guy to do it, at a really great cast. All the chips were really in play, which is why it is so disappointing for me to come on here and say that Welcome to Marwen just might be one of the most disappointing films of the entire year. I was extremely let down by this movie. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely things to like about it. I do not think this is as bad as a film as people are saying, but it definitely is very disappointing, and we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And look, from an acting perspective, everyone for the most part is really good here. I don't really think, there are some iffy performances overall, which I'll get into, but the main performances I thought were really good, especially Steve Carell. Steve Carell does a really great job in this role. Even the character of Mark Hogenkamp as a character, we'll get to him a little bit later, but Carell is really able to elevate this role. He conveys a lot of the emotion, a lot of the difficulties that Hogenkamp is going through. You see that he's someone who's struggling with a very deep form of PTSD, which has pretty much just crippled his entire life. His entire worldview has pretty much been shooken up because of it, and Carell just does a really great job at conveying these emotions, especially in some of the scenes where it's a little harder to discern how Hogenkamp is feeling. Carell does a good job of communicating that to us, and I feel like a lesser actor, this could have just crashed and burned entirely, but thankfully Carell was very dedicated to the material. Again, especially when the character isn't working, he's still able to, project this emotion, and we still do feel for this character because of Carell's performance, and in spite of the character's many flaws, Carell really did rise to the occasion here. I don't think this is like beautiful boy level, but he definitely did a very good job. I really liked what he did here, and I definitely think he gave a very strong performance. Now, as far as all the women go, they're fine. No one really stuck out to me all that much. Leslie Mann does do a really good job for what she has. I liked Merritt Wever. Janelle Monáe was really good. All of them are really good in this movie. And then there's Diane Kruger, who, without really spoiling anything, Diane Kruger is basically this character that Mark has conjured up, and he doesn't know where she's come from, but she seems to be sort of like, sort of like, kind of like this person that's like persuading him to do things, and I don't know, this role really did not work at all. I really was not a fan of her. I thought she was really over the top, and the character especially, we'll get to her a little bit later, but I was not really a fan of her. Gwendoline Christie as well, I thought was very over the top here. I wasn't really a big fan of her. And then Neil Jackson in this movie is terrible. I caught a bit of him on Westworld when he was in there, and he seemed to be a fairly good actor, but here, I don't know what he was doing. He was way too over the top. The way he goes about it, he doesn't have a lot of scenes in this movie, but for what he has, it was not very believable. I'm sure this character did exist in real life, but this just did not feel like a very believable performance. Like I said, the performances really do range from good to whatever. It's really only Carell that I could say is like consistently great throughout it. Now, in terms of the directing and the writing, this is where the film, unfortunately, really does take a nosedive for me, because, look, the directing here is Robert Zemeckis, who's one of the most creative guys out there. You know, he's someone who's brought us stuff like Back to the Future and things like that. Like, this guy knows how to make a really great creative film. Unfortunately, though, I don't really know what happened here, because this film is very tonally inconsistent. There are a lot of points in this movie that can be a lot of fun. The motion capture sequences especially. There are some fun moments with Mark in the beginning of the film. And again, there are definitely some fun moments in the movie, but then the film tries to take itself really seriously as well. And those two tones just do not balance here. His sort of, witty, fun stuff he's trying to do in the motion capture sequences, and then you couple that with the very traumatic story that we have here, it just does not really work. And I feel like he should have had a more established tone of what he really wanted to do, but just overall, his direction here does not feel very inspired. It doesn't really feel like he had an idea of what he wanted to do with this story. He kind of just wanted to tell it, and that's kind of it. Like, it didn't really seem like he had a firm grasp of what he really wanted to do here in terms of this narrative, and I think that really did kill this film overall, unfortunately, and the writing very much does show that. Now, he's not the only person who wrote this film. I believe Thompson was her name as well. She co-wrote this film with him, and the writing in here is a bit of a mess. I mean, Look, I came out of this film, to be honest with you, very conflicted. In fact, the most conflicted I have been with any film this year. I literally had no idea how to feel about it coming out. I was like, did I like it? Did I not like it? Because there are a lot of things that I like here. The things I like the whole general premise here that Mark has this world that he's created and he goes back to it and it plays a vital role in his life. And again, it's sort of his escapism from the harsh reality that he had to deal with, and it's also sort of a coping mechanism for him. I like the idea that each of these women, they're all named after someone who has had a significant impact on him. I definitely really do like that idea. I like the idea that these women, he starts to see them as their counterparts in Marwen, and I do like the way that comes up. There's a lot of really interesting stuff there. The motion capture stuff, I actually really enjoyed. That story I thought was actually really strong. It was very interesting. It was a lot of fun, and I really did enjoy a lot of the motion capture stuff. We'll get more into that when we get to like the cinematography and things like that, but the story that was going on there, I definitely really enjoyed a lot. And again, there definitely were some interesting ideas that the film does throw in there. But that's when we get to the stuff I didn't like about this movie, because for everything I liked, there's something I didn't like. There were many times where I was getting into the film, and then I just kind of sat there and realized this is really not that interesting of a story, and that's not because of the story. The story itself, it's a brilliant story. It is a very emotional and resonative story that, if told well, I think could have been one of the most effective films the entire year, but unfortunately, every single idea in this film is so half-baked, and it's so just, it's basically just kind of brought up and then they forget about it, and that really applies to all of the women in the film. Besides Nicole, and to an extent Merritt Wever, none of these women feel fleshed out. None of these women feel like real characters. They all just feel like random people that Mark met up with, and for some reason they've had some sort of impact on his life. I really did not understand what was so special about some of these women. Like, literally one of these women is a girl that he meets at, he talks to at a bar, and, they occasionally will, he'll help her out at the bar and things like that. Another one is, a housekeeper, and she's, tending after his things, and a lot of these characters, I did not understand, why did he choose to pick them? Why did they have this significant impact on him? I think the one that is the most egregious out of all of these, though, is this one character that he has this affliction for. Her name is Suzette, and she is this exotic actress, and for whatever reason, Mark is, obsessed with her. He considers her his favorite actress, and it's really creepy, especially when you factor in the fact that, when you factor in that the actress that's playing her is actually Robert Zemeckis' daughter. Yeah, it really did not sit right with me. I don't know why that was a thing. I don't know what the point of that was. And again, if they would have delved into it a bit more, maybe it wouldn't have come across as creepy as it did. But it did here, and it just, it really did not work for the kind of story they were trying to tell. And that brings me to my other big problem with this movie, is that Mark as a character, as interesting as he can be, there are times in this movie where he can get honestly really creepy, and I did not like the direction they went in with him. He has this affliction with women's shoes. That's a big part of this movie, is that he loves to wear women's shoes because he loves the essence of women. And that's really it. It's incredibly surface level. We don't really get into, like, why does he like this so much? Like, okay, sure, he likes women's shoes. That is a good starter topic. That's a good, like, you know, kind of a leading question. Like, okay, he likes women's shoes. It gets us to where we need to go, but let's dive into that a little bit more, and we never do. It's something he likes to do, and I understand, like, that's who he is, and we should accept him for that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the film does not really give much time to flesh that out and show this is why he really loves to do it. I feel like the film could have gone a lot more, you know, one step beyond and really fleshed that out more, but they didn't do that. And again, I think there was a big missed opportunity because a lot of the stuff with him comes across largely very off-putting. The relation between him and Nicole, it starts off and it's fun, and I definitely did enjoy it at first, but where it ends up going, no, that does not make any sense whatsoever. I don't know what they were trying to do there. Leslie Mann kind of leaves the film after this. Like, she's in the film for a good chunk of it, and then she just leaves, and they never come back to her, and I really did not understand why. It was very odd overall, and it did not work for the type of story they were trying to tell. Also, in terms of the motion capture stuff, like I said, while I was enjoying the story at first, there is one turn that this film takes with the story towards the end, and it is absolutely ridiculous. And not only is it ridiculous, but they really shove this idea down your throat. It's one of those things that is very emotionally manipulative, and there are times where this film can get very emotionally manipulative, and what they try to do with this, it's absolutely ridiculous, and I don't think it really worked here at all. It seemed like something that they kind of thought of, but they didn't really think it over, and I don't really think it worked in the way it was supposed to. And it made the motion capture stuff, it left a very bad taste in my mouth, because for a while I was like, I really am loving this motion capture story. I kind of want to see a whole movie of that. But the way it ended up going, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a story of that, because it does not tie well to the main narrative. At first, it's like separate, where it's like part of Mark's mind, but eventually they actually try to tie it into the main narrative, and it just does not really work at all. And I don't really think it made a lot of sense. And again, like I said, a lot of the concepts in this film are very half-baked. They don't really dive into them a lot, and I wish we would have gotten a lot more with these women. In terms of cinematography, though, like I said, the motion capture here is stunning. It is really great to look at. Yes, there are parts of this movie where it does lean into Uncanny Valley a little bit, but for the most part, I actually really love the motion capture stuff. I thought it worked very well with what they were trying to do. There are some really great shots in this movie. The cinematography is really at the top of its game here. If there is one thing to praise this movie for, it is its motion capture. It looks very good. They got dolls that very much looked like the humans in the film, and they did a really great job with that overall. I know how hard that can be to pull off, but they really got it down here, and I was very impressed by that. In terms of the score is really good. It's Alan Silvestri. Obviously, it's very good, and it definitely was very moving at points. And the editing, this film is extremely choppy. I'm going to say that right now. The first 20 to 30 minutes, I was honestly really bored. It took me a long time to actually get into this story, and then when I was, the film just became very inconsistent, especially in its third act, which is where I really do think the film was at its worst, because it was actually getting really interesting. I was actually kind of getting into it, but when they started to cut from the main world, and you have this really grounded emotional story, to the ridiculousness of the motion capture, it does not work. It really throws you off. You don't feel the emotion you're supposed to in the, regular world, and you don't feel the fun that you're supposed to in the motion capture world, because again, it just totally takes you off guard. There'll be a really emotional scene happening, and then we cut to something funny that's happening in the motion capture world, and it just does not really blend overall. The ending of this movie as well is very rushed. It kind of just abruptly ended, and I did not think it was a very satisfying ending at all. Overall, Welcome to Marwen is a film that has a lot of really interesting ideas. It has a performance by Steve Carell that I do think is really great. It focuses on a really interesting story, but overall, it just left me feeling very emotionally hollow. I did not feel very satisfied what we got with this character. I felt like we could have got into him a lot more than we actually did. The motion capture stuff, while at first is fun, eventually it leans a little too heavily into this really ridiculous sort of twist it ends up taking, and that did not really work for me at all. The story overall, it just wasn't as impactful as it really could have been. It's very service level. It does not feel nearly as dived into as it really could have been. And at the end of the day, it just kind of made me really want to watch the documentary, and I'm very conflicted, honestly, because there are things I really do like about this movie. There are moments where I was like, I'm really liking this movie, but every time I did, it reminded me why I wasn't enjoying it. So overall, this is a very disappointing film that I really want a lot more from, and I am going to give Welcome to Marwen overall a C. I know this review was very confusing, but honestly, so is the film. It's very hard to tell what they were really trying to go for here. I think they were definitely trying to go for a really grounded, emotional story, and it just did not come off, I think, the way they wanted to. But if you have seen Welcome to Marwen, let me know what you guys thought of it, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.